The 25 most famous artworks by Michelangelo. Number 25. Apollo David. From the year 1530 to the year 1532 after Christ. Unfinished. The Apollo David is one of Michelangelo's most intriguing sculptures, created between 1530 and 1532 AD. Although left unfinished, this work captures the essence of the Renaissance in its transition towards a more introspective and experimental approach. During this period, Michelangelo was working in a political and cultural context marked by the influence of the Medici in Florence and the tensions surrounding his work on monumental projects. The figure depicted combines two classical iconographies: Apollo, the Greek god of the arts, and David, the biblical hero. This symbolizes the fusion of classical and Christian ideals, a constant in the Italian Renaissance. In technical terms, the Apollo David is characterized by its serpentine form, which gives the figure a unique dynamism. Although unfinished, the sculpture reveals the master's skill in working with marble, especially in the contours of the muscles and the balance of the body. The relaxed yet tense position of the figure suggests movement and serenity simultaneously, reinforcing the connection between the divine and the human. Michelangelo left areas of the marble unsculpted, allowing us to observe how his creative process evolved, from the initial strokes to the finest details. The significance of Apollo David in Michelangelo's career lies in his ability to reinterpret traditional themes from a personal perspective. The work reflects his continuing interest in exploring human anatomy and emotional expression, cementing his legacy as one of the most influential sculptors in the history of art. Although left unfinished, this piece is considered a testament to his relentless pursuit of technical and conceptual perfection. A curious fact about this work is that for a long time there was debate as to whether it actually represented Apollo or David. This ambiguity has led to multiple interpretations, further enriching its artistic legacy. The Apollo David remains an example of how even unfinished works can have a profound impact on art history. Number 24. Lita and the Swan. Circa 1530 AD. Lost painting. The painting, Lita and the Swan, attributed to Michelangelo, depicts one of the best-known legends of Greek mythology, where Zeus, transformed into a swan, seduces Lita. Created around 1530 AD, this work is an example of the Renaissance master's ability to reinterpret mythological themes with an innovative approach. Although the original painting has been lost, historical records, sketches, and copies made by other contemporary artists offer us a glimpse of its composition and its importance within the artistic canon of the Renaissance. The historical context of the work reflects the Renaissance fascination with classical myths and their adaptation to humanist values. Michelangelo would have used this narrative to explore the sensuality and idealized beauty of the human body, a recurring theme in his work. In the surviving sketches, the figure of Lita displays exceptional dynamism, with postures that defy gravity and highlight the master's ability to capture movement and emotion in static forms. Technically, Lita and the Swan would have been a masterful example of the use of chiaroscuro to emphasize the contrast between light and shadow. This approach allowed the three-dimensionality of the figures to be brought out, creating a vibrant interaction between the main characters and their surroundings. Furthermore, the anatomical details, especially in the figure of Lita, show Michelangelo's obsession with the study of the human body, a characteristic that defines much of his work. Despite its loss, the influence of Lita and the Swan persists in art history. The work was widely copied and reinterpreted, proving its impact on later generations of artists. Interestingly, Some theories suggest that Michelangelo destroyed the painting due to criticism or changes in his artistic vision, adding an air of mystery to its legacy. Number 23. The Christ Portacroce. Uncertain date. The Christ Carrying the Cross, also known as Christ Carrying the Cross, is a work whose exact date of creation remains uncertain. However, it is attributed to Michelangelo during a period of artistic maturity in which the master was exploring deeply spiritual and humanistic themes. The figure of Christ carrying the cross symbolizes not only sacrifice and redemption, but also the physical and emotional burden faced by humanity. This representation resonates with Michelangelo's religious and philosophical sensibility, marked by his interest in the relationship between the divine and the human. In artistic terms, the work stands out for its detailed depiction of Christ's anatomy. Every muscle seems to tense under the weight of the cross, while his facial expression reflects a mixture of suffering and serenity. This combination of technical and emotional elements demonstrates Michelangelo's ability to convey psychological complexity through his art. Christ's posture, slightly leaning forward, suggests movement and realism, a characteristic feature of the Renaissance. Although it has not been determined with certainty whether this work was conceived as a sculpture or a painting, its impact on art history is undeniable. The Christ Portacroce represents a key moment in the evolution of religious art, where the humanity of Christ becomes the central focus, moving away from the more idealized representations of previous eras. An interesting fact is that some historical references mention this work as part of a series of studies that Michelangelo carried out on human suffering. This personal approach adds depth to his interpretation of the subject, making Christ the bearer of the cross an essential piece within his artistic corpus. Number 22. Rondanini Pietà, around 1552 and 1564 AD. Unfinished. The Rondanini Pietà, one of Michelangelo's last works, was begun around 1552 and remained unfinished at the time of his death in 1564 AD. Considered by many to be an artistic testament, this sculpture reflects the introspection and spirituality that defined the master's later years. The work depicts the Virgin Mary holding the body of Christ after his crucifixion, a recurring theme in Michelangelo's career, but here it takes on a deeply melancholic and personal character. Unlike his other Pietas, the Rondanini is characterized by its simplicity and lack of refined details. However, this apparent austerity gives the work a unique atmosphere, where emotion prevails over technical perfection. The figures, elongated and almost ethereal, seem to dissolve into the marble, symbolizing the fragility of life and the proximity to death. The significance of the Rondanini Pietà lies in how it encapsulates Michelangelo's artistic and spiritual evolution. While in his youth he focused on anatomical perfection and monumentality, in this final work he prioritizes emotional expression and connection with the transcendental. This transformation makes him a precursor of Mannerist art, which sought to transcend the conventions of the Renaissance. A fascinating detail is that it has been speculated that Michelangelo worked on this sculpture until just a few days before his death. This fact reinforces the idea that the Rondanini Pietà was both a work of art and an act of personal devotion. Number 21. Crucifix of Santo Spirito, 1492 after Christ. The Crucifix of Santo Spirito, created in 1492 AD, is one of Michelangelo's earliest known works and a testament to his precocious skill as a sculptor. Made of wood, this crucifix was commissioned by the convent of Santo Spirito in Florence, a key place in the artist's early training. The work is notable for its delicacy and realism, capturing the body of Christ with anatomical precision astonishing for a young man of just 17 years old. In technical terms, the crucifix reflects the influence of the anatomical studies that Michelangelo carried out in the convent hospital, where he had access to cadavers to perfect his knowledge of the human body. The figure of Christ, represented in a relaxed and natural posture, breaks with the rigid representations typical of the period, marking a move towards a more humanistic and realistic style. The Crucifix of Santo Spirito has a particular relevance in Michelangelo's career, as it was one of the works that caught the attention of his early patrons, consolidating his reputation as an artistic prodigy. Although less known than his monumental sculptures, this crucifix is an early example of his ability to combine technique, emotion, and spirituality in a single piece. A curious fact is that this work remained hidden for centuries, until it was rediscovered in the 20th century, causing astonishment due to its quality and historical importance. This discovery reaffirmed Michelangelo's genius even at the beginning of his career. Number 20. The Battle of the Centaurs. Circa 1492. This work by Michelangelo, made around 1492, is one of the most significant pieces from his early life. Created under the tutelage of Lorenzo de' Medici in Florence, the Battle of the Centaurs is set against the backdrop of the early Renaissance in the 15th century, a time of intense artistic and philosophical advancement. The marble, carved with a mastery uncommon for such a young artist, reveals a scene of controlled chaos, human figures and centaurs intertwined in a fierce struggle, capturing movement and dynamism in a traditionally rigid material. Michelangelo's technical mastery is evident in the taut muscles, dramatic facial expressions, and detail of the anatomies. Not only does this piece anticipate his future skill in works such as the David, but it also shows his interest in the representation of the human body as a vehicle for conveying emotions and narratives. The limited space of the composition does not impede the sense of depth. Each figure seems to be alive, immersed in an almost tangible conflict. This ability of Michelangelo to manipulate perspective and volume in low relief positioned him as a master in the making. Historically, the work is linked to the classical influences that dominated Florentine culture during the Renaissance. Mythological themes, such as centaurs, were common in this period, but Michelangelo gives them a unique treatment. The tension between humanity and animality is presented as a visual metaphor for human passions, a recurring theme in his career. Although it was not a commissioned work, it became a testament to the young sculptor's potential and to the importance of Greco-Roman mythology in Renaissance artistic narrative. Interestingly, the Battle of the Centaurs was never fully finished, adding an air of mystery to its already intense composition. This unfinished piece, however, serves as a reminder of Michelangelo's innate ability to breathe life into marble. The artist himself is said to have considered this work one of his favorites, a statement that underscores the personal and professional significance of this early creation. Number 19. Madonna della Scalera, around 1490 and 1492. The Madonna of the Staircase, an early work by Michelangelo dated between 1490 and 1492, is a marble bas-relief depicting the Virgin Mary holding the Christ child. This work, produced in Florence during the artist's early apprenticeship, is notable for its compositional serenity and its clear influence from the classical style that prevailed in the 15th century Renaissance. Despite his youth, Michelangelo demonstrates an impressive control of marble, balancing technical complexity with emotional sensitivity. The composition is simple, yet deeply symbolic. Mary, seated with an air of tranquility, appears abstracted as she holds the child. In the background, The stairs suggest both a physical and spiritual connection to the divine, an interpretation that transcends the mere representation of the biblical scene. The soft, flowing lines, combined with the lack of unnecessary ornamentation, focus attention on the main figures, while the use of bas-relief allows for visual depth without sacrificing the delicacy of detail. In historical context, this work reflects the influence of Donatello, who perfected the technique of relief during the early Renaissance. However, Michelangelo brings his own distinctive stamp by focusing more on the emotional interaction of the figures than on decorative elements. It is a work that captures both the fragility of motherhood and the spiritual strength of the Virgin, a balance that would become a constant in his later works. A little-known fact is that the Madonna of the Staircase was carved during his time in the workshop of Bertoldo di Giovanni, a protege of Donatello. This environment allowed the young Michelangelo to explore advanced sculptural techniques and develop his unique approach to artistic representation. Although an early work, this sculpture anticipates the greatness that would define his career. Number 18. Madonna Pity, circa 1503 and 1505. The Pity Madonna, created by Michelangelo between 1503 and 1505, is one of his most intriguing and least-known sculptures. This piece, sculpted in marble, shows the Virgin Mary with the child Jesus in an intimate moment of contemplation. It was created during the height of his career in Florence in the 16th century, a period marked by the evolution of artistic forms towards greater expressiveness and naturalism. In this work, the artist abandons the formal rigidity typical of many religious representations to present a more natural interaction between mother and child. Mary is depicted with an air of serenity, while the child Jesus seems to move with curiosity and restlessness. The sculpture manages to capture both the sweetness and emotional complexity of this relationship, using marble in an almost painterly way to convey depth and movement. The historical context of the Pity Madonna is deeply linked to the Florentine Renaissance, a time when artists sought to combine aesthetic beauty with a profound spiritual message. Michelangelo achieves this by providing the sculpture with a perfect balance between anatomical realism and symbolism. The triangular composition, a recurring feature in Renaissance works, guides the viewer's gaze towards the emotional center of the piece, the unbreakable bond between mother and child. This work is believed to have been commissioned by the Pity family, one of the most influential in Florence, as part of their effort to consolidate their cultural prestige. However, what distinguishes the Pity Madonna is not only its aristocratic background, but Michelangelo's ability to transform a commission into a deeply human work. This innovative approach would go on to define his artistic legacy. Number 17. Capitol Square, from 1536 to 1546. The Piazza del Capitolio, designed by Michelangelo between 1536 and 1546, is one of his most outstanding contributions to Renaissance architecture. This project, commissioned by Pope Paul III, is located in the heart of Rome, on the Capitoline Hill, and represents a milestone in 16th-century urban planning. The square harmoniously combines elements of classical antiquity with Renaissance innovations, reflecting Michelangelo's creative genius on a monumental scale. The design of the square is notable for its elliptical shape, which breaks with the tradition of rectangular squares and symbolizes an inclusive embrace towards the citizens. At the center, Michelangelo placed the equestrian statue of Marcus Aurelius, an emblem of imperial power that connects Rome's glorious past with its contemporary Renaissance. Radial lines emanating from the center guide the eye towards the surrounding buildings, creating a sense of movement and cohesion. Historically, the Capitoline Square was a strategic project intended to reaffirm the political and cultural importance of Rome in the 16th century. Michelangelo, aware of this intention, designed the square to be viewed from multiple angles, creating a dynamic experience for the viewer. His work on this project not only revitalized the Capitoline Hill, but also set a precedent for modern urban planning. A fascinating detail about this work is that Michelangelo never saw his design fully realized, as work continued after his death. However, his innovative vision remains intact, consolidating itself as a testament to his ability to transform urban spaces into living works of art. Number 16. Madonna of Brugge. From 1501 to 1504. The Bruges Madonna, carved by Michelangelo between 1501 and 1504, is one of the few sculptures by the artist to have left Italy during his lifetime. Now housed in the Church of Our Lady in Bruges, Belgium, this work depicts the Virgin Mary with the infant Jesus in a majestic and elegant pose. It was created during one of Michelangelo's most productive periods, just after he completed his iconic Pietà. The sculpture stands out for its vertical composition and delicate treatment of marble. Mary is depicted as a regal figure, with an introspective gaze that contrasts with the childlike energy of the infant Jesus, who appears to be about to take his first step. This contrast between calm and movement adds a unique dynamism to the work, demonstrating Michelangelo's ability to capture complex emotions. In its historical context, the Bruges Madonna reflects the Renaissance ideal of divine and human beauty. The sculpture was acquired by Flemish merchants, underlining the international reach of Renaissance art and Michelangelo's reputation as a master sculptor. Its arrival in Bruges marked a milestone in the spread of the Italian Renaissance to Northern Europe. One of the most intriguing stories about this work is its tumultuous journey through the centuries. During the Napoleonic Wars and World War II, the sculpture was looted and later recovered, becoming a symbol of cultural resistance. This legacy adds a layer of historical significance to an already deeply meaningful work. Number 15. The Battle of Cascina. From 1504 to 1505. Unfinished. Michelangelo's unfinished work, The Battle of Cascina, represents a fascinating chapter in the history of Italian Renaissance art. Commissioned in 1504 AD, the piece was to be part of an ambitious decorative project in the hall of the Great Council of the Palazzo Vecchio in Florence. Intended as a fresco to celebrate the Florentine victory over Pisa in 1364, its visual narrative was to capture a decisive moment in the battle. Although never completed, the preparatory sketches and studies show Michelangelo at the height of his artistic prowess, combining profound anatomical knowledge with intense emotional expressiveness. The composition, known primarily through copies made by contemporary artists, presents a scene full of dynamism and movement. At the center of the design, Michelangelo depicted Florentine soldiers surprised while bathing in the Arno River. The male bodies, rendered with anatomical precision and detail, capture the transition between the vulnerability of the moment and the ready reaction to enemy attack. This study of the human body, with tense muscles and complex postures, shows the artist's obsession with anatomy and his ability to endow his figures with life and energy. The impact of the Battle of Cascina goes far beyond its unfinished state. The surviving sketches and fragments profoundly influenced later artists, such as the young Raphael and the Florentine Mannerists, who found inspiration in the intensity and complexity of Michelangelo's figures. This project also highlights the rivalry between Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci, as both artists were commissioned to decorate opposite walls of the same room, creating a historic competition between two of the greatest geniuses of art. Although never fully realized, the Battle of Cascina symbolizes Michelangelo's ingenuity and ambition at a crucial stage in his career. His ability to capture the interplay of body and emotion in a historical context demonstrates why he remains a central figure in art history. Interestingly, many critics and scholars consider that, even in its incomplete form, this work surpasses many finished frescoes of its time. Number 14. The Crucifixion of St. Peter. From 1546 to 1550. The Crucifixion of St. Peter, painted by Michelangelo in the 16th century, is one of the most moving works of his late career. Commissioned in 1546 AD for the Pauline Chapel in the Apostolic Palace at the Vatican, this piece illustrates the martyrdom of the Apostle Peter with a dramatic intensity and spiritual depth that reflect the artistic and emotional maturity of the master. In this fresco, Michelangelo depicts the moment when St. Peter is nailed to an inverted cross, symbolizing his humility and his desire not to be crucified in the same manner as Christ. The fresco is notable for its asymmetrical composition and its use of light and shadow to draw attention to the central drama. At the center, Peter's robust body, full of life and tension, rises as the executioners struggle to position him on the cross. The facial expressions of both the executioners and the spectators convey a mix of awe, fear, and devotion, creating a visual narrative that captures the essence of Christian sacrifice. Michelangelo also used a dark, earthy color scheme to highlight the seriousness of the moment, a stark contrast to the brighter works of his youth. In technical terms, this work is a testament to Michelangelo's ability to adapt his style to the emotional and spiritual context of his time. Whereas his earlier works were steeped in classical idealism, the Crucifixion of St. Peter displays a concern for the humanity of his figures and the emotional weight of the narrative. This is especially evident in the body of the apostle, which, though powerful, is burdened with resignation and suffering. The work marked a milestone in the history of religious art, not only for its technical quality, but also for its ability to evoke an emotional response in the viewer. As a curious fact, Michelangelo worked on this fresco while simultaneously supervising the construction of St. Peter's Basilica, which adds a level of symbolism and personal connection between the artist, the place, and the subject represented. Number 13. The Conversion of Saul. From the year 1542 to the year 1545. The Conversion of Saul, painted by Michelangelo in the 16th century, is a fresco that reflects the master's deep spirituality and technical virtuosity during the last years of his life. Commissioned in 1542 AD to decorate the Pauline Chapel in the Apostolic Palace in the Vatican, this work narrates the biblical moment when Saul, the persecutor of Christians, is struck down by a heavenly light and becomes the Apostle Paul. The scene captures both the drama of the event and the transformative impact it had on the history of Christianity. The composition is notable for its use of movement and diagonality to draw attention to the central point, where Saul lies on the ground with an expression of wonder and fear. The figure of Christ, surrounded by intense light, dominates the upper part of the work, symbolizing divine intervention. Vibrant colors and dynamic brushstrokes add a sense of urgency and movement, while anatomical details and facial expressions show Michelangelo's technical mastery. Stylistically, the Conversion of Saul combines elements of the late Renaissance with a more emotional and expressive approach that anticipates Baroque art. This shift reflects not only Michelangelo's artistic evolution, but also his growing interest in spiritual themes and his personal connection to biblical narratives. Through this work, the artist succeeds in conveying Saul's internal struggle and eventual surrender to divine grace. The influence of this fresco extended far beyond its time, inspiring artists such as Caravaggio, who reinterpreted the subject with an equally dramatic approach. Fun fact: Michelangelo completed this work in parallel with his work on the dome of St. Peter's Basilica, displaying his ability to balance multiple large-scale projects. Number 12. Laurentian Library. From 1524 to 1559. The Laurentian Library, designed by Michelangelo during the 16th century, is a masterpiece of Renaissance architecture that combines functionality, innovation, and aesthetics. Commissioned by Pope Clement VII in 1524 AD, this library was conceived as a space to house the vast collection of manuscripts of the Medici family in Florence. Its design marked a milestone in architecture, setting new standards in the use of space and materials. One of the highlights of the library is its vestibule, known as the Rossetto, which combines classical elements with unique architectural innovations. The central staircase, with its fluid and dynamic forms, seems to flow like a river into the main space, creating a visual and emotional transition for visitors. The columns embedded in the walls and the decorative details reflect Michelangelo's ability to reinterpret classical language with a personal and modern approach. The reading room, with its elegant symmetry and proportions, is designed to encourage concentration and contemplation. Long rows of wooden tables, illuminated by tall, narrow windows, create an atmosphere of serenity and purpose. Every detail, from the benches to the ornaments, was carefully designed by Michelangelo to harmonize with the intellectual purpose of the space. The Laurentian Library is a testament to Michelangelo's genius not only as a sculptor and painter, but also as a visionary architect. His influence can be seen in later Renaissance and Baroque buildings, which adopted and expanded upon his innovations. Fun fact: Michelangelo personally oversaw the details of the project, even while residing in Rome, showing his dedication and commitment to perfection. Number 11. Design of the Dome of St. Peter's Basilica. From 1547 to 1564. The design of the Dome of St. Peter's Basilica in Rome is one of Michelangelo's most iconic contributions to art and architecture. Commissioned in 1547 AD, late in his life, Michelangelo took on this monumental task with the goal of completing the most important church in Christianity. Although the dome was completed after his death, its design marked the high point of his career as an architect and his legacy as one of the most influential geniuses of the Renaissance. The dome, inspired by that of the Roman Pantheon and that of Santa Maria del Fiore in Florence, is a technical and aesthetic achievement that combines perfect proportions with a sense of monumentality. Michelangelo designed a double structure, with an inner and outer dome, which not only provided stability but also a majestic appearance when viewed from the outside. His innovative use of brackets and buttresses allowed the dome to reach impressive heights without compromising its structural integrity. The interior of the dome, decorated with mosaics and frescoes, draws attention to the sky, creating a symbolic connection between the earthly and the divine. Michelangelo conceived each element with a deep sense of spirituality, ensuring that the design reflected the religious and cultural significance of the basilica. Although faced with numerous difficulties, including budgetary constraints and political conflicts, the artist remained faithful to his vision. St. Peter's Dome became a model for later generations of architects, from Bernini to Bramante. Interestingly, Michelangelo used to refer to this work as the old man of the church, a metaphor that reflects both his respect for the institution and his personal commitment to the project. Number 10. Christ of Minerva. From 1519 to 1521. The Christ of Minerva is a masterpiece that stands out within the sculptural legacy of the Italian Renaissance. Made between 1519 and 1521 AD, this imposing marble sculpture is attributed to the genius of Michelangelo Buonarroti, who managed to create a striking representation of the figure of the resurrected Christ. The work was designed to occupy a prominent place in the Basilica of Santa Maria sopra Minerva, in Rome, and is recognized for its balance between majesty and delicacy. Christ appears standing, holding a cross and with an expression that conveys both serenity and sacrifice. The historical context of this work is at the height of the Renaissance, when art was deeply influenced by humanism and the search for anatomical perfection. In this case, Michelangelo demonstrates his technical mastery by sculpting the musculature and proportions of the human body in extraordinary detail, generating a sensation of realism and divinity simultaneously. The marble used is of high quality, and its polishing reflects the light in a way that highlights the natural curves of the body, which intensifies the perception of living flesh petrified in stone. Despite being admired for its technique, the Christ of Minerva has been the subject of historical debate. In its original conception, Michelangelo had planned a completely nude representation, in keeping with Renaissance ideals of classical beauty. However, a modesty cloth was later added, reflecting the tensions between artistic trends and religious norms of the time. This contrast between the artist's intentions and later interventions underscores the challenges creators faced in balancing their personal vision with institutional demands. A fascinating detail is the position of Christ's feet, which rest on a small sphere, symbolizing victory over sin and the earthly world. This work, although less known than Michelangelo's other creations, remains a powerful reminder of his ability to unite spirituality and technical perfection in a single piece. Number 9. The Slaves. From the year 1513 to the year 1516. The Slaves is a series of unfinished sculptures that Michelangelo Buonarroti worked on between 1513 and 1516 AD, as part of a monumental commission for the tomb of Pope Julius II. These figures, also known as the dying slaves and the rebellious slave, represent a pivotal moment in the sculptor's career, revealing his inner struggle to free the figure from marble, a concept he defined as giving life to stone. Although the sculptures never became part of the mausoleum, they are a testament to his incomparable artistic genius. In technical terms, the slaves are a perfect example of Michelangelo's mastery of marble. The figures seem to partially emerge from the stone, as if trapped within it, creating a powerful visual metaphor for the human struggle against physical and spiritual limitations. The anatomical representation is impeccable, and the muscular tensions of each figure convey a palpable sense of suffering and resistance. The Italian Renaissance, in full swing, was a period in which artists sought technical perfection and emotional expression. In this case, Michelangelo manages to capture both dimensions through the unfinished appearance of the sculptures. This incomplete effect, far from detracting from their value, adds a conceptual depth that has been the subject of analysis for centuries, representing the eternal battle of the human soul to achieve freedom. A curious fact is that the slaves were finally donated by Michelangelo to Roberto Strozzi, a Florentine nobleman, as a thank you for his hospitality. Since then, these works have traveled through different collections and museums, serving as a testimony of how even an unfinished work can transcend in the history of art. Number 8. Tondo Doni. Around 1503 and 1504. The Doni Tondo, painted around 1503 to 1504 AD, is one of the few documented paintings by Michelangelo Buonarroti, notable for its unusual circular shape and vibrant composition. Commissioned by Agnolo Doni as a wedding gift for his wife, Maddalena Strozzi, The work is a magnificent depiction of the Holy Family, surrounded by nude figures in the background symbolizing the connection between the divine and the earthly. Today, the Don Tondo is housed in the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, where it continues to captivate thousands of visitors. Technically, this painting is a masterpiece of tempera and oil on panel technique. The attention to anatomical detail is astonishing, with each figure carefully sculpted into the painting, reflecting Michelangelo's deep knowledge of the human form, gained through his experience as a sculptor. The vivid colors and dramatic lighting showcase his ability to combine three-dimensionality and depth in a two-dimensional medium. The Tondo Doni is not only a piece of exquisite artistic value, but also a reflection of the cultural and spiritual tensions of the time. The choice to include nude figures in the background, seemingly removed from the main biblical narrative, has sparked debates about its meaning. Some art historians suggest that these figures represent humanity before the arrival of Christ, in contrast to the grace and redemption symbolized by the Madonna and Child. A fascinating detail is the serene expression of the Virgin Mary, who holds the child Jesus with a gesture that conveys both protection and acceptance of divine destiny. This work not only consolidates Michelangelo as one of the great painters of the Renaissance, but also demonstrates his ability to convey complex emotions through the interaction of his characters. Number 7. Baccus. From the year 1496 to the year 1497. The Baccus, executed between 1496 and 1497 AD, is one of Michelangelo Buonarroti's earliest sculptures, created during his stay in Rome under the patronage of the banker Jacopo Galli. This marble figure represents the Roman god of wine in a state of intoxication, holding a goblet and accompanied by a small satyr devouring bunches of grapes. The work masterfully combines realism and mythology, standing out for its irreverent interpretation of the classical divinity. The sculpture is distinguished by its attention to detail and the way Michelangelo manages to convey the fragility and imbalance of the human body. Baccus appears with a relaxed, almost staggering demeanor, while his eyes reflect an expression of euphoria and abandon. This unconventional approach to depicting a deity is a testament to the Renaissance interest in humanizing mythological characters, bringing them closer to the human experience. In a cultural context, the Italian Renaissance was a time when artists were experimenting with new ways of depicting the human figure, and the Baccus is a perfect example of this trend. Michelangelo manages to capture the duality of divinity and imperfection, presenting a god who, although powerful, is also vulnerable to excess. An intriguing detail is the inclusion of the satyr, who not only serves as a narrative element, but also as a visual contrast that highlights the central figure. The Baccus remains a key work in Michelangelo's early career, demonstrating his ability to innovate even within the confines of classical traditions. Number 6. Tombs of Lorenzo and Giuliano de' Medici. From 1520 to 1534, the Tombs of Lorenzo and Giuliano de' Medici, executed between 1520 and 1534 AD, are a sculptural ensemble designed by Michelangelo for the new sacristy of the Basilica of San Lorenzo in Florence. This funerary monument is a sublime example of the artist's ability to integrate architecture and sculpture into a unified work, charged with symbolism and expressiveness. The design includes allegorical figures of day and night on Giuliano's tomb, and dawn and twilight on Lorenzo's. These representations personify the passing of time and the inevitability of death, while the figures of the Medici are idealized, reflecting their status and power. The architectural composition is equally impressive, with a monumental design that guides the viewer's gaze towards the central sculptures. In technical terms, these sculptures stand out for their detailed anatomy and the way Michelangelo manages to convey deep emotions through the figures' postures and expressions. The Night, in particular, is famous for its melancholic serenity, while the Dawn seems to awaken with a gesture full of life and hope. This contrast of emotions adds a philosophical dimension to the work, suggesting the duality of life and death. A fascinating detail is how Michelangelo manages to capture not only the physical beauty, but also the introspection and emotional weight of each figure. This monument not only pays homage to the Medici family, but also stands as a testament to art's ability to explore the complexities of human existence. Number 5. Moses. Around the years 1513 and 1545. The sculpture of Moses, created by Michelangelo between 1513 and 1545 AD, is one of the most emblematic works of the Italian Renaissance. Made of white Carrara marble, this imposing figure was part of the project for the tomb of Pope Julius II, a work that Michelangelo never completed in its entirety due to various political and personal conflicts. Moses is depicted seated, with the tablets of the law in his hands and an expression of majestic authority that makes him a symbol of divine leadership. The level of detail in this sculpture is extraordinary. The tense muscles, the curly beard and the veins running through his hands are evidence of Michelangelo's technical mastery. The horns that adorn Moses's head, the result of an interpretation of the Latin translation of the Bible, have become one of the most distinctive elements of this work. Moses's posture, with his torso turned and his face looking into the distance, suggests an internal dynamism that gives life to the marble. In historical terms, the figure of Moses represents the connection between divine law and humanity, a central theme in Christian theology. Michelangelo managed to capture this symbolism with an emotional intensity that has fascinated generations of viewers and art scholars. Despite interruptions and changes to the original project for the tomb, Moses stands as a testament to Michelangelo's ability to transform matter into an expression of the eternal. An interesting detail is how Moses's gaze seems to follow the viewers as they move around the sculpture. This effect, combined with his monumental posture, reinforces the feeling of being before a living figure, whose authority transcends time and space. Number 4. The Last Judgment. From the year 1536 to the year 1541. The Last Judgment, painted between 1536 and 1541 AD, is one of Michelangelo's most imposing frescoes and one of the most significant works in the Sistine Chapel. Located on the altar wall, this monumental composition portrays the second coming of Christ and the final judgment of souls, based on the Book of Revelation. Standing over 13 meters high, this work reflects the spiritual tension and political challenges of the Counter-Reformation. The work is dominated by the central figure of Christ, surrounded by saints, martyrs, and angels. His powerful gesture divides the righteous, ascending to heaven, from the damned, dragged down to hell. Michelangelo uses chiaroscuro and intense coloring to create a dramatic effect that underlines the message of salvation and damnation. Each figure, from the saints displaying the instruments of their martyrdom to the damned fighting against their fate, is charged with an almost sculptural energy. The Last Judgment was controversial from the outset due to the nude depictions of the figures, which some considered inappropriate for a religious context. In the 16th century, some of the figures were covered up by other artists on the orders of the Vatican. However, even with these modifications, the work remains a testament to Michelangelo's genius and his ability to address themes of great theological and emotional complexity. A detail that few know is how Michelangelo included a self-portrait in the figure of Saint Bartholomew, who holds his own skin as a symbol of his martyrdom. This personal gesture adds a layer of introspection to a work destined to move all who contemplate it. Number 3. The Pietà. From 1498 to 1499. The Pietà, sculpted between 1498 and 1499 AD, is one of Michelangelo's most moving and technically perfect works. This sculptural group, made of Carrara marble, represents the Virgin Mary holding the lifeless body of Jesus Christ after the crucifixion. It was commissioned by Cardinal Jean de Bilhiers for St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, and its beauty made it a benchmark of Renaissance sacred art. The composition of La Pietà is characterized by its serenity and harmony. Although the figure of Christ is represented at a natural scale, the Virgin Mary appears slightly idealized, with enlarged proportions to support the weight of her Son. The delicacy of the folds in Mary's clothing contrasts with the stillness of Christ's body, achieving a perfect balance between humanity and divinity. Michelangelo, barely 24 years old at the time of its creation, demonstrated a mastery of marble that few artists have achieved. This work marked a milestone in Michelangelo's career, cementing his reputation as one of the foremost artists of his time. His signature, carved into the band across the Virgin's chest, is the only known example of Michelangelo leaving his name on one of his works. This reflects not only his pride in the work he accomplished, but also his desire to secure credit in a highly competitive artistic context. A little-known detail is the subtlety with which Michelangelo depicts pain in La Pietà. Rather than showing Mary torn by suffering, the sculpture conveys a sense of resignation and peace, inviting the viewer to reflect on the mystery of redemption and sacrifice. Number 2. David. From the year 1501 to the year 1504. The sculpture of David, created between 1501 and 1504 AD, is one of the most outstanding achievements of Michelangelo and of the Italian Renaissance in general. Made from a single block of white Carrara marble, this monumental work, over 5 meters high, depicts the biblical shepherd boy in the moment before his confrontation with Goliath. David symbolizes not only the triumph of virtue over brute force, but also the Renaissance ideal of man as the measure of all things. From a technical standpoint, the work is a marvel. Michelangelo used marble with unprecedented skill, achieving a level of detail in the human anatomy that conveys both strength and vulnerability. The tense muscles, the veins running through the hands, and the focused gaze of David are proof of the artist's ability to capture the essence of life in stone. Furthermore, the contrapposto used in David's posture, with the weight of the body resting on one leg, gives the figure a dynamism that seems to defy the rigidity of the marble. David was originally conceived as part of a series of sculptures for Florence Cathedral, but its perfection led to the decision to display it in the Piazza della Signoria, becoming a symbol of the Florentine Republic and its resistance to external powers. Its public location allowed the people to adopt it as an emblem of freedom and self-improvement. A fascinating fact about this work is how Michelangelo worked with a block of marble that had been rejected by other sculptors as defective. His ability to transform this raw material into a masterpiece of epic proportions demonstrates not only his artistic genius, but also his ability to see the hidden potential in what others discarded. Number 1. The Vault of the Sistine Chapel. From 1508 to 1512. In the 16th century, between 1508 and 1512 AD, Michelangelo carried out one of the most astonishing artistic feats in history, the painting of the Sistine Chapel vault. This commission, carried out under the direction of Pope Julius II, marked a turning point in the Italian Renaissance, both for its technical complexity and its conceptual ambition. The vault covers more than 500 square meters and narrates key episodes from Genesis, from the creation of the world to the fall of man, incorporating prophetic and symbol figures that connect the Old and New Testaments. The fresco technique used by Michelangelo requires the application of pigments onto wet plaster, a task that had to be carried out with great speed and precision. Michelangelo, who considered himself more of a sculptor than a painter, worked in extreme conditions, standing on scaffolding and dealing with the political and religious tensions of the time. The composition, arranged in multiple panels, includes more than 300 figures, all characterized by their monumentality, impeccable anatomy, and emotional expressiveness. The celebrated scene of the creation of Adam became a universal icon, representing the divine connection between God and man. The work not only cemented Michelangelo's fame, but also redefined the boundaries of mural painting and art in general. The artist's ability to combine biblical narrative, technical mastery, and profound symbolism resonated with later generations, inspiring artists such as Raphael and Caravaggio. Furthermore, the Sistine Chapel vault set a standard of artistic grandeur that continued to influence the development of European art for centuries. A fascinating detail of this work is how Michelangelo, despite physical and emotional difficulties, managed to endow each figure with a unique individuality. From the powerful prophets to the delicate figures of angels, the vault remains a testament to the infinite human capacity to transcend limitations and create something that defies time. Thank you for watching our video. Subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. Give it a like, comment your thoughts, and share this video with your friends and family.